Good afternoon, everyone. I'm with Charles Cecil, the Managing Director of Revolution Software. Please tell us about Revolution, Charles, and what you've been working with recently.
Well, there's been an awful lot going on. On one side, we've been working with the BBC on the Doctor Who project, the adventure games, which were released. Two of them have been released, one a couple of weeks ago, one last week. And that's been a great project. And on the other, we've been writing our own games, Broken Sword on iPhone and iPad. We're currently working on the PC and Mac versions. And we've got a couple of original projects as well. So it's actually a very, very busy time, exciting time.
That's great. And I know that you set up Revolution, is it 25 years ago now?
1990, just the other day.
You're no spring chicken to the industry, but a real innovator within the sector. Tell us how you came to be working in the industry in the first place.
Well, when I left school, I thought I wanted to be a mechanical engineer because I loved Victorian engineering. And I was sponsored by Ford. In those days, actually, this is sort of late 70s, early 80s, it was much easier being a student because you actually got grants in those days and didn't have to pay them back. And I went to work for Ford, and it was a fantastic sponsorship. It was called the Special Engineering Program. We were going to be the captains of industry. But unfortunately, I fairly quickly realised that actually this wasn't the vocation for me. And I felt rather guilty that I was taking the place of somebody that would have been a much better engineer than me. So anyway, I saw the course through. It involved a fair bit of management. We learned about accountancy, presentations. They pointed video cameras at us so that we could make sure that we could spread the word about Ford effectively. A bit of law. And when I finished, I left, and I'd actually met, there was a friend of mine who was also at Ford, and he'd just set up a company called Arctic Computing based in Hull, and he invited me to write some adventure games. And it was just such fun. In those days, obviously you had the ZX81, it was 1K of memory. And we were writing games like 1K chess, which is just unbelievable if you think about it now. A chess program, and it played a really good game. And I wrote a number of adventure games and loved it. And so when I left, I decided actually either could go into engineering or go into video games. And I chose to go into video games, and I have not regretted it for one moment.
And the industry hasn't regretted it either, Charles.
Okay.
So I know Revolution started as a developer and has morphed into a publisher in recent years. But I know you've got a really interesting, innovative business model for working with partners and the collaborations that you do. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
To go back slightly, I worked for Arctic for a bit. Then I was approached by US Gold to work for them. So I went to the publishing side, and then Activision, and then founded Revolution in 1990. So I'd spent a few years working as a publisher as well, which was very valuable to see both sides of the and not hopefully to see it from an objective viewpoint rather than a subjective viewpoint. But regardless of that, for whatever reason, as a developer, the business model just did not make sense. It hasn't done for quite a long time, because ultimately what happens is, if a game goes into retail, forgetting about tax, then the retailer takes 50%, and then the format holder takes £3 out of the remaining £10 if it's selling for £20, and then the publisher pays you a small percentage, and they can can a game at any time. So the problem is, if you have an overhead, you're incredibly vulnerable because you're not making much money in the first place. And if a project is cancelled, then until you get a new one, obviously you've got a huge amount of wage going up. So what we decided about 5 or 6 years ago was to actually change that, and instead of employing people, to have a core hub of people that worked on a contract basis, and then outside that, more people that we pulled in for projects on a case-by-case basis. So, I have a very close relationship with Dave Gibbons, who we've worked with, who was the co-creator of Watchmen. We would never in a million years employ him. Barrington Phelan, who's written our music, again, we would never in a million years employ him. So the way that it works is that we have different layers of people, and so for Broken Sword Director's Cut, Dave came in to create the facial expressions, which was great. He actually then brought in his the person he works with for colouring, who actually worked very closely with us on that as well. As it happens, the colorist has worked pretty much full time for us since then. He's been pulled in but nobody actually works on a contract basis. And the really good thing from our perspective, of course, that's great because we don't have an overhead. But it also means that the relationship with these people is really good because they can go off and do anything else whenever they want. So we maintain a good relationship with them if they're good, but then they also maintain a relationship with us. So there's this sort of for me, it's a much better relationship than the traditional employee-employer relationship. And so far I'm thrilled by the way it's worked.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting the way that you've done things, and I know a lot of others are moving in the same direction.
Well, you either have to be big or small.
Okay.
There's sort of no in between. So with the BBC, I've worked with Sumo Digital in Sheffield, who've been great. They're several hundred people, and for them it's that's ideal because if a project gets cancelled, if things change, they can move people around. They've got enough projects at any one time to move people around very fluidly, and for them it works very well. Otherwise, you need to be very small so that you're agile and you have a low overhead. Anything in between, the size that we were, 30 people, is totally wrong because you have no flexibility.
Okay. And I know you're based in York and have been for all of your time in the business. Is that a great place to live and to work?
I think humanity can be divided into different categories. Those that want to live in London and those that don't. And those that want to have a permanent job and those that want to work on a contract basis. So we have this sort of Venn diagram. I was brought up in London, and I love London, but for a number of reasons I really didn't want to live there. So if you don't want to live in London, then there are certain places in the UK which are great. And I have to say York ranks pretty highly, because not only is it a beautiful place, but also it's got the most fantastic train service down to London. I think if anybody's watching from GNER, the prices are a bit high, and can you put the dinner back on again, please, because we really miss that. But seriously, the fact that you can actually get around the country really quickly, and particularly if you don't have employees and you want to visit people, you can get to Sheffield very quickly, you can get to Leeds quickly, Edinburgh, London. So as a hub, it works extremely well. And it's a beautiful city as well, so no, it's ideal, it's worked very well for us.
Fantastic. And finally, what advice would you give a job seeker wanting to work in the games industry?
Well, right at the very beginning, if you want to go into programming, get good maths, please, 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 or physics. It's really important that you have key core subjects. And if you want to go into art, learn draw first. When I was employing people, if somebody could draw a hand, then I'd employ them, because you can always take somebody who can draw and teach them 3D, but not the other way around. So learn the core subjects, please.
That's great. Charles Cecil, MD of Revolution, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, David.